The views and opinions expressed on the Cap are those of the hosts. They do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of OldMilk Media. Any opinions stated aren't intended to offend anyone.
On this episode of the Cat Podcast, we react to Mixtape Pluto by the one, the only, Future. Welcome back. This is episode 519 of your critical but accurate tour through hip hop, the Cat Podcast. I'm Taylor McLeod and I'm back. I've missed the last couple episodes. I've been, moved back from California to the East Coast. Been working, been grinding, but that's not important. Today I'll be riding solo. Our man Nate Sperlin is celebrating his birthday this weekend, which is very important, much more important than anything, where I've been. I thought about singing happy birthday to Nate the second we got on here, but it felt wrong to do that without him. So maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that next time we're here. But, happy birthday, Nate. Thanks for holding it down when I was out. And yeah, let's get into it, man. Before we get into the podcast, I want to thank you for tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening or watching. Please feel free to join the conversation. Leave a comment below, like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode of the Cap. And also, like I said, to join in the conversation. Jump in the comment section. We read what you guys put in there, and it's important to us to get feedback on these episodes. So definitely do that. Make sure you're subscribed, and yeah. So today we're going to be reacting to Mixtape Pluto by Future. This album was announced a few weeks ago. It was initially supposed to come out on September 13th. It got pushed till September 20th. You got 17 tracks here, 45 minutes. When it was initially announced, the track list was initially announced. There were no features listed, and I think a lot of people thought they were going to be hidden features or surprise features. But this album doesn't have any features. This is 17 tracks and 45 minutes of Future by himself, doing his thing, which, for me and for Nate as two, huge Future fans, you can't ask for much more. You can't ask for much more than Future by himself getting into, what's been going on for himself, not necessarily what's been going on outside himself, but within himself. It's his third project of this year. Obviously, we had the first two, which were We Don't Trust You and We Still Don't Trust You, his two albums with Metro Boomin, which Nate and I reviewed back when they came out. We love both of them. But I do think that those two albums were overshadowed a little bit, or maybe not overshadowed, but the second we had the Like That verse from Kendrick Lamar on the original album, We Don't Trust You, I think it set off the Drake and Kendrick beef, the Drake and Kendrick issue, the back and forth that was, more than 10 songs back and forth. J. Cole got involved, Rick Ross got involved, A$AP Rocky's still putting out music, Kanye tried to get involved, and I think for me at least, and I think for a lot of people who really pay attention to this, those two albums got lost in the shuffle a little bit because, and Drake said it on Family Matters. He said they made two separate albums distant. And while that isn't entirely true, both albums weren't, it wasn't just about Drake. But obviously, based on what it kicked off in the titles, We Don't Trust You, We Still Don't Trust You, and the subject matter of both albums, and in Metro Boomin's problems with Drake and Future talking about Drake on the opener on We Don't Trust You, I think it was inevitable that the music, and we got a ton of it. We got two full albums and a little bonus EP tacked onto the end of the second one from Future and Metro Boomin, who have made so much incredible music together. We got all this music from them, and usually that could stand on its own too, and really carry itself. And for Future fans, for fans who put the time in with both those albums, it did. But I do think, like I said, I think it got lost in the shuffle a little bit. So as we came into this Mixtape Pluto era, Future started tweeting about Mixtape Pluto, posting about Mixtape Pluto, and obviously it gets Future fans excited for a time that from Dirty Sprite 1 probably through the double album in 2017, which was Future and Hendrix. I think so that's from 2011 or so until 2017. And really, when people talk about Mixtape Future, I think they're more talking about 2014 to 2017 or 2016. You have Monster, 56 Nights, Purple Rain. That that stretch, which is a legendary stretch with Dirty Sprite 2, the album dropped right in the middle of it in 2015, and What a Time to Be Alive with Drake, also in 2015. That mixtape run is, there have been comparable runs. Obviously, one that comes to mind is like mixtape Lil Wayne. Um, his run is probably the most legendary ever. But in terms of the 2010s, in terms of, rap in the internet era, I don't know if I don't know if there's been a run like Future had from 2014 to 2016. You have arguably five classic projects in the span of 2 years, which is obviously unheard of. So Future starts talking about Mixtape Pluto, and it's hard not to get excited. It's hard not to think that he's going to reach back for a time that, is 7, 8 years old at this point, and is really, I think, the bedrock for a lot of Future fans, their fandom. I think that's when things, because he was already a star before all that, but that run really cemented who Future was and his importance in hip hop, his importance in rap, his influence on rap, and I think the idea of Mixtape Pluto coming back, it was so exciting. But you don't know what it's going to sound like, right? 2024 is a lot different than 2014. Um, Things are a lot different. The way people consume music is a lot different. Future's run at this point is a lot different. I mean, in 2014, I wouldn't say he's new to the game, but he's definitely a burgeoning star instead of the certified superstar that he's been since that run. So there's definite excitement coming into a project like this, trying to figure out if, this is going to sound like Monster, if you're going to get a throwaway, you're going to get a Codeine Crazy, if you're going to get a Perky's Calling, a News or something, anything like that. You're kind of waiting for that to see if he can really capture that magic. And I mean, even the cover alone, you have the Dungeon House, which is the home of the Dungeon family, and Rico Wade, legendary Atlanta producer who is also Future's cousin and passed away earlier this year. The cover of Mixtape Pluto is the Dungeon House lit up purple, which is only fitting for Future. And when you get into this album, it's fitting for this project, man. So I came into this with tempered expectations. Future's one of my favorite rappers ever. He's in my top three at the end of the year list every year. Um, I listen to him. Obviously, I listen to him. It's only two other artists that I listen to as much as I listen to Future, and that's every year. That's every single year. So I come into this with tempered expectations, but there is that excitement deep down that, are we going to get the Future that I and so many people really like fell in love with his music? And it's hard. Like I said, it's difficult to expect that from an artist who's in a much different spot. You have a guy who was, you know, approaching 30 at that point. Now he's approaching 40. Things are way different. You're coming on the heels of the beef, like I said. So obviously you get into it, and it's one of those things where you got to come into it with tempered expectations because you don't want to be disappointed, but it's also Future. And no one can do Future like Future. No one can do music like Future. So like I said, there is that excitement. There is that understanding of what could be coming. And I think that 17 songs, no features, that's the perfect way for Future to prove that Mixtape Pluto's the real deal, and not just an album title with, a project with a bunch of features that doesn't really focus on Future, and it's making more mainstream palatable music as opposed to the music that he's been known for so long. And the opening song, man, the opening song, Teflon Don, it's cinematic. The beat comes in, it builds up, it has the strings and building, and it's cinematic, and Future gets right into it. He sets the scene for the whole project. The bass is like booming in this, and that's a theme throughout. You have a lot of heavy production in this. I think that's the best way to describe it. A lot of heavy production in Teflon Don. It's immediately to that mixtape feel. It's not as glossy, it's not as polished as some of the more recent music we've gotten from Future. Um, and he just gets right to it, man. Like he said he beat his first case like John Gotti, invoking that gangster rap, not necessarily the West Coast gangster rap, but the mob boss gangster rap that is only fitting for someone of Future's stature, especially, he's got 20 years in the game, 15 years as a star. And it's perfect. Future gets right into it. The rapping is great off rip. Um, the production, it hits you right in the heart, and it sets things, it sets the scene for the rest of the project. He introduces his Ace gang ad lib, which appears throughout. Um, and it's just Future doing his thing. And for longtime Future fans, the second you hear a song like this, you immediately make the face, and you're like, all right, I'm listening to all 17 of these in a row, and don't bother me. The headphones are on, got it playing in the car, wherever you listen to it first. It's it gets right to it. And then second song, man, Lil Demon carries Teflon Don right into it. And that the production on Lil Demon is louder, heavier. I have it here in my notes, all caps, booming. And that's the truth. Like it hits you. This is a perfect song to play in the car. This isn't necessarily a song that I'm, you know, just listening to in the headphones around the house. If I'm, going to get something done, going to whatever. Not so much, play sports anymore because I'm a little over that hill, but that's a song that hypes you up. That like it gets you going, and that's a perfect song. Like a group of people, car with the windows down, everything turned all the way up. Little Demon is loud, and it's just a continuation of Future. It's not. There's no reach for the hit. There's no, it's not like a song that you would expect someone like Drake or Young Thug to just show up on. It is a Future song, and that's important. It's important. And then it goes right into Ski. And I think Ski is where the first 5 or 6 songs of this project, to say the first 5 really, the production sounds very similar. And I think that for artists who, or for fans who have no investment in Future, it could be a point where you might just stop. You might think of it as like, all right, this is starting to sound the same. But I think the rapping on Ski is arguably the best rapping in the entire project. Not just because Future's rapping fast. I think that's such a big thing, especially on the internet where people, someone starts rapping fast and everyone goes crazy. But Future slides through pockets like no other rapper can. Um, and he's just going. And my favorite word to describe Future's music and especially his flow is relentless. And Ski's the perfect example of that. He's just going straight ahead, and it's unstoppable when he gets in that mode. Like I said, you might start thinking at a point like this that it's getting repetitive, but you know, if you're really invested in what Future has to say and what Future's putting together, like it's not a deterrent at all. You just believe it's early. I wrote here in my notes. I said it's early. We got a lot of time left, and Future definitely doesn't disappoint with the lot of time he had left. I think Ready to Cook Up for me is one of the more forgettable songs in this project. It fits well within the context of the first couple songs here. I don't really have much to say about that, especially with Plutoski coming right after Ready to Cook Up. I mean, I think Plutoski, especially because it's early in the project, it garnered the most immediate reaction online from what I could see. Talking to people about it, talking to people who are listening to it the morning it came out. Plutoski, the thing that jumps out at you is on the hook. Future is slurring his words hard. He's not even really putting words together. You have the ad libs in the back, which are it's Future's actually there, but the hook is more Future making noise than anything. And I think a lot of people on Twitter especially were turned off by that. But if you think back to like a song like Tony Montana, where you can tell that his jaw's a little tighter than usual. I don't want to speculate on why that is. I think it's one of those things where it's like Future's one of the only artists who would take the risk to put that out there. Like whether you think it sounds good, you think it sounds terrible, I think to me at least it's important to like make just noise sound cool. Like there's not a lot of artists that can do that, and that's what makes Future. So Plutoski I think Plutoski ended up being a polarizing track for a lot of people personally. I enjoy it a lot. It's one of the ones that I've kept coming back to over these last couple days that the record's been out. Um, I understand why it's polarizing. If you're not used to something like that, if you're not looking for something like that, it might be, like what's going on here. But for me, it's just Future doing Future, and I'm always here for that, especially because the next song, Too Fast, is I would say like my Too Fast is where Future gets into his bag. That is my favorite listening to Future. The beginning of the beat to me when it came on, it sounded like so much like My Savages. It's not a perfect, it's not a carbon copy or anything like that, But when it came on, it was the first one that I really was like, all right, here is the future that I'm looking for. And then you start to get into the greater theme of this project here, which is, this juxtaposition, this comparison of where Future has ascended to in his life, and that's money wise, popularity wise, fame wise, and where he came from. He's rapped so much about having nothing, being in Atlanta with nothing, having to do whatever it took to make money, whether that's, selling this, selling that, working on music here, working on music there, working with this person, working with that person, involving family members, friends. I think that Too Fast is where we really start to get into that juxtaposition that appears so often through this project. And it's like relationship Future, which is one of my, if not my favorite, it's one of my favorite versions of Future. I mean, he's talking about showering women with these expensive gifts, designer clothes, watches, jewelry, trips to Greece. They're holding up designer drive. They're, stopping traffic to walk out with shopping bags. And at the same time, though, it's so melodic, and the tempo here on Too Fast, I wouldn't say it's too fast. It's certainly faster than the rest of the project, and Future just skates on it through the hook, through the verses. Future completely skates. When this came out, I always, if I'm listening to an album for the first time, I'll post, a song or two on my story, and this one immediately, I did it with all the comment emojis, for the Fire Marshal Pluto. Too Fast to me was, it was the one that fully locked me in, that said, all right, this is Mixtape Pluto is Mixtape Pluto. Like, this isn't a super polished, super, super poppy, anything like that. Like, this is Future at his best, doing what he does best. And in the whole theme of the song, man, he's talking about, got the new G-Wagon, got the new Paddock, got the new, Richard Millie. I was moving too fast. He said he was doing the dash and wasn't even trying. And I think that it all speaks to, the ascension of an artist of that caliber. And there's not many. You know what I mean? It's like Future, Drake, Young Thug, and from their generation, like, I would say that those three are really the three that have, ascended to the heights that they have. And Future's in here saying that he was, running towards the ascent, running through the ascent, and almost like getting ahead of himself without even trying to. Um, and enjoying it, reveling in it as it's happening, but there's still like a tinge of, I wouldn't say regret, but there's a tinge of thoughtfulness, of looking at it and saying, all right, is this what's really happening here? Is this what's supposed to be happening? And then you get to Ocean, the next track, which is another one of my favorites. And I think this is where you really have the crossing of those two roads. I mean, the a line I pulled from here, it's like, so many tears I could fill up an ocean. And then he's talking about, how he came up with his cousins, how he came up with the people he grew up with, and then had to cut certain people off when he started to, to bubble and get this level of fame. And now he's at the place he's at, and he's, all over the world buying whatever he wants in these condos, in these houses, designer jewelry, anything like that. But he's still, it's like looking inward. It's humanizing in a way that I think a lot of artists of his stature have trouble finding. And it's looking inward and saying, like, I still feel like that same guy, despite everything around me, despite everything I've accomplished, despite everything I've accumulated. I still feel like that guy, even though a lot of his music has been about the ascent, has been about, being at the top, and looking down, and seeing people trying to copy him, and trying to, sound like him, dress like him, move like him, all that. But it's looking, now we're at a point, you're on a different plateau, and you're looking at all of it and saying, I'm here, I've made it to this point, but now I'm realizing, like, that 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 guy who's sleeping on the floor of the dungeon house, like, so famously sleeping in the basement of the dungeon house, is still there, and willing to do, whatever it takes to stay at the top and continue moving forward. And that's where it comes in, man. Like, I've always said, relentless is my favorite word to describe Future's music. And I think that ocean bleeding right into to press the button is so important. Like, on press the button, these little one liners, like, a lot of the stuff is Future just talking slick, being cool, which is important and it's what makes him him. But he said like you must have forgot the 56 Nights flow. And 56 Nights is such a crucial project in his discography when Esco was locked up for 56 nights. And, he didn't, all the music they had recorded together was, out of their possession and they had to figure it out, and he said, a few years ago, he said that's when he, did Beast Mode with Beethoven. Um, and I think that like all of these are callbacks to the mixtape era, but it's also like the feeling of that mixtape era, the relentless drive to continue getting better, to continue, making new waves in figuring it out in different ways. And I mean, it's inspirational. It's inspirational. Like I think this is the part of the project for me where I start to look at certain things like MJ and Brazier or Brazier, however you want to say it. Like to me, those don't hit as hard in that narrative. But at the same time, like you can't have it be, completely one dimensional. You can't have a project that's just about, being at the top, but looking back to where you were. So I understand why those are there. And you still gotta, if you're Future, you still gotta talk about, everything you gotta talk about. Some song like MJ, record like MJ, like obviously, he's talking about what Future talks about. If you listen to that record and Future's MO, like it's not surprising to see that there. But then, man, again, you come right back to South of France, and I think to me, this with Ocean is probably the best example of it. He said, he's to me, this is the most interesting production on the album. It sounds different than a lot of the rest of the songs, and to me, that's important. But I think like he said he's in the south of France drinking mud. He said no matter how rich he gets, he still feels that guy from the hood, and like it's this repetitive thing, and I think that that's where we get the mixtape Future sentiment. It's not necessarily the sound. Like not everything on this project was gonna sound like everything on 56 Nights. Like this wasn't gonna be Never Gonna Lose or Inside the Mattress or Perky's Calling or Hardly, Fetty, My Savages, anything like that. Like it's not about the sound, it's about the sentiment. And I think that a song like South of France, I think a song like South of France is so important for that. He says he's all over the world doing everything he wants. You know what I mean? It's not a thought to go to the South of France. It's not a thought to go to Greece. It's not a thought to buy a new condo here, get the house in the hills, but it's still like looking back at, the people he came up with and everything like that. And, I don't want to be a broken record either, but I mean, that's the through line here. That is the through line here. And man, obviously everyone experiences music differently. Everyone experiences certain artists differently. But for me personally, as someone who listens to Future like every single day, these are the songs I always come back to. Like these are the songs throughout his entire discography that I always come back to. The ones where it's like the odds were stacked against him. He defeated all the odds. He made it to where he's at, but he's still willing to go the extra mile to keep it pushing and keep getting better. And you have the collabs with Metro Boomin, you have the two big songs with Drake off his last solo project. You still have the features and the I wouldn't say pop star stuff, but the rap superstar stuff. But at the same time, like Future's still Future, and the Future that was so famous. I mean, 21 Savage said in an interview a long time ago. He said Atlanta has always listened to Future more than anyone. Like even when Drake is blowing up, when Wayne is on top of the world, when all these other rappers, Kendrick Lamar's taking the world by storm, Rocky's having his moment back in the early 2010s. Like the people who are from what Future's from are still there listening to Future, and I think that that's so obvious. I mean, Surfing a Tsunami, the next track after South of France. Um, little sidebar, the background synthesizer on that song is incredibly loud, very distracting. That's the only real negative I have in terms of the music here, in terms of how things sound, how they're put together. That synth is incredibly loud. I've listened to it in multiple different vehicles. I've listened to it headphones, off my laptop speakers, off my phone speaker, and that's got to be turned down. I don't think this is going to be a Kanye situation where we're going back through everything and tweaking stuff here and changing stuff there. But man, that that synth is incredibly loud, but not as important as what Future has to say. I think from the beginning off that Future skates, like the flow is so I wrote here the flow is so silky, and he's is showing exactly why he is that guy, why he's Future and nobody else is. And you combine that with the song Oath, where he calls himself a misfit, which doesn't really like make a ton of sense on the surface. Like for Future, like a rap superstar who's clearly made it, has clearly, won over the hearts and minds of other rappers, other artists, pop stars, fans of different demographics. Like, for him to think he's a misfit, but it does make sense when you really look at the bigger picture. It does make sense because, I think there's a strong argument to be made that out of the generation that started, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that Future by himself is the most influential rapper from that generation. You can put the Drakes aside, put the Kendricks aside, Cole's aside, Young Thug's aside. I think that Future stands alone in that respect because, you look at how things have changed since Future arrived, and there's so many rappers who try to sound like Future, who try to rap about the same shit Future raps about, who, the shift from old rap gear, jerseys and fitteds and all that to strictly designer. And obviously other artists play a part here. The Louis Vuitton Don Kanye West in the mid 2000s was talking about all that. But I think that Future almost like created a sound and a uniform. And he said it on the song Crazy But True from The Wizard. He said it's down to his like socks and his rings, the way he drops his mixtapes, the ad libs and everything. Like I, artists have been trying to copy Future for 15 years now, and they can't. Like, there's been certain artists who can rap with him. I think Young Thug, did the collab tape with him. Juice World did the collab tape with him, and they can rap on the same level, and they have that same relentless flow and the same relentless drive. But they're not Future. You know, no one is Future. Future to me is the most influential artist of a generation, and that's not a small feat. He might not be the greatest rapper of a generation. He might not be the biggest rapper of a generation, but to me, he is the most influential rapper of his generation, and that could mean more than any of those other categories, in the grand scheme of things. I mean, influences everything in a lot of ways, and whether you're the best rapper, the biggest rapper, because you obviously have Cole, Kendrick, and Drake arguing, fighting for those other titles, but I mean, to me, Future stands alone as the most influential artist of his generation, and I mean, to me, it's not particularly close. But I mean, despite that, you have a song here like this, the second to last track, "Lost My Dog." It immediately takes a downshift. This project does because through 15 songs, there's emotional moments, but it's always guarded a little bit with a sense of Future's feeling these emotions, but he's still gonna do what he needs to do. And then you get to Lost My Dog, and it's completely stripped back. I mean, you have the guitar, like the guitar driving the beat, and it's very open. It's very open and emotional. And he leads off. He says, "I lost my dog to fentanyl," and that appears multiple times throughout the song. That is the hook. Um, and he goes into detail. He says that he lost his friend to fentanyl. He going back through the text messages, seeing that this person was in crisis. They were going through it, and the signs were there, but you have this life going on, and then it happens. And obviously Future's always rapped about drugs, and I think that that's bled into a lot of artists as well. Not to say that rappers weren't rapping about drugs before Future, but I do think he changed the way that it happens. He changed the prevalence. He changed the outwardness of how it happens, and this song really addresses a lot of it. Um, he says, "Drugs in my body, I still cry for you. Like living in the hills, I can still feel the sadness." So again, you have this, for a lot of this project, you have a lot of like, at the top looking down and saying that he still feels like that young man working hard to get to where he's supposed to get to. And on this, it's more like he's, in that house in the hills, looking at the landscape, looking at what he came from, and feeling the emotion of that, not necessarily the looking at the path he's taken, or looking at the work he's put in, but looking at the loss that comes with that and the emotional toll that comes with it. And he even he's publicly said before that he's cut back on certain things, whether that's sipping lean or taking prescription pills or anything like that. He said he's changed, but on this, man, he says he thought he was done with it. He said, "Thought I was done with it, got the news about you, and all it made him want to do is relapse." And like, that's a that's full heart on the sleeve. Like there is no hidden message there. There is no, coded message. There is no slick wordplay to explain that. It is he says exactly what he means. And I think that, to have an artist of this stature rapping like that, it makes you take a step back. And it's hard to always look at superstars in any genre, any entertainment field, whether it's movies, music, TV, athletes. It's hard to think about them as the regular person because you see so much else. You see the product they put out, you see what they do when they're at work, you see the money that comes with it, what the money buys, where they're at, the curated social media feed. You see a lot of that, but then you get a song like this. To me, this is why hip hop and rap are, some of the maybe the purest, music form that there is, because it is so direct. It is, you have to be hard on the sleeve. You have to say exactly what you mean. There's different ways to package it, but Future comes right out and says it, man. He says, he lost his friend to fentanyl, which is obviously part of a much larger conversation, much larger story that's affecting, this country and the rest of the world. But then he brings it into himself and says like how it's affecting him, and saying something like, the second I saw the news what happened to you, something awful that happened to you, the first thing you wanted to do is relapse. And I think that's real for a lot of people, a lot of people going through a lot of different shit. So a song like this, I think it's important for an artist like Future, especially for an artist like Future, to put this together and to put it on Mixtape Pluto, to not put it on a mainstream studio album. That a song like this might get lost in the shuffle. I think, from the title to the idea of Mixtape Pluto, you're gonna have a lot of fans who have been around for a long time, going through this project song by song, picking apart what's being said, picking apart what sounds like this, what sounds like that, making connections to previous projects, to previous eras. And to have a song like Lost My Dog that is so like brutally honest and open, it makes you take a step back and, remember that this is, a real guy, even though it feels like he's an alien sometimes, and feels like he's from outer space, feels like he's a wizard. Like this is a real guy, and a song like this proves it. But, Future is Future, so he has to end on a powerful note. Ace Gang again. This is another song where the production's booming. He ties in the Ace Gang ad lib, which, he uses throughout this entire project. And it's another one of those examples of Future introducing a new ad lib or a new, whether it's a new sound, new ad lib, anything like that. He ties it all together here at the end. I think Lost My Dog could be the outro, but that definitely does end on a very somber, very low note. But, Future pulls it back together, ends on a super high, super powerful note. Um, and really delivers like I don't know if this is a perfect project necessarily, but this is, I think Mixtape Pluto is it hits the nail on the head. As it pertains to playback value, I know Nate and I, bring this up every album, and I do think it's, important conversation. Objectively, I don't know. I always struggle to think about the objective because it's hard to gauge, where things are going to go, especially if someone surprise drops, more shit pops off between artists who are, beefing. To me, this probably will last a few weeks to a few months. I think there's songs here that have the legs to turn into hits. I saw just a couple hours ago, like Future holds the entire top 10 on Apple Music. Obviously, it'll be a while before we see how this performs on the Billboard charts. But I think there's plenty of songs here that have more than enough legs, more than enough staying power to last at least a few months, if not more. Subjectively, playback value for this is indefinite. Like I really like this album. I really like this mixtape. I'm gonna keep coming back to it. And there's songs here, like a song like Too Fast or Ocean or South of France. Like those are coming with me. Those are sticking. Like when I jump in the car and I just, scroll down to Future in my artist in my phone, and I just click shuffle. Like these are songs that I'm looking for when I'm skipping through certain things that I'm not trying to hear that day. Like these are songs that I'm looking for immediately. Because they're that good. They're that good. Like I mean, Future's catalog is endless at this point. You have so many projects, whether they're mixtapes, EPs, albums, LPs, anything like that. There's so many at this point. There's surprise releases. There's ones that we wait for forever. There's, mixtapes that run together. There's the Dirty Sprite series. There's Beast Mode series. We have so much of this, and these songs stick out to me. Like especially Too Fast. Like Too Fast Too Fast Pretty Quickly is, it might not be my favorite Future song ever because there's so many that I've, been with for a decade plus at this point. But Too Fast immediately jumps high on my lists, and I think for a lot of other people it'll be right there. You know, wrapping this up, I think that, like I said to begin this episode, I think when you hear something like Mixtape Pluto, you're excited about the possibility, but you don't want to get like your hopes too far up, because if this is just an album title and the sentiment doesn't come with it, obviously there'll be enjoyable music, but it's not going to hit like you thought it was. But Mixtape Pluto, man, I think that Future delivered. I think that he delivered that mixtape sentiment. I think he delivered on the idea of what Mixtape Future is. And again, it's not about the sound of Mixtape Future. It's about the sentiment. It's about that drive, that unending relentlessness to just keep going. And that's not to say it doesn't appear on albums, right? Like I think the song "Never Stop," the intro on "The Wizard," is a perfect example of this. But I think that mixtape versions of it are a little raw, a little a little dirtier, a little grittier, a little more to the point. And I think that Future hit with this. Like, it's 17 tracks. It's just him. I think that, like, in a way, I'm thankful there's no features here, because you really get to sit with every song, and there's no moments that take the internet by storm, where it's like, oh, like, oh, we got a Gunnaverse here, or Lil Baby here, or Travis Scott skated on that, or oh my God, like, are those background vocals from The Weeknd, or not at this point anymore, but it used to be like, oh, we got a Drake verse here, a two Drake verses here. um Things are certainly different with the dynamic between certain artists, but I am thankful that this is just Future, and this is a project that we'll get to sit with, and just sit with what he had to say. I'm also thankful that there's very little allusion to the Drake Kendrick beef that got set off because of a song on a Future album. And Future was obviously involved in that. He had stuff to say on both albums. Drake had stuff to say about him. The conversation online has been about whether they'll ever make music again. I'm so thankful that there was very little of that here. I saw some people cooking up theories about Future and Playboy Cardi, like some tension there, but all in all, overall, like, we didn't get the same sentiment here about anybody, except real life people. And not to say these other rappers aren't real life people, but the people in Future's real life, not his rap life. That's what this album is mainly focused on, and I'm thankful for that, because I appreciate the two albums we got earlier this year, and it's great music. Like, Nate and I talked about it. Like I said, Nate and I talked about it, and it's great music on both of them. But I do think things got lost in the shuffle, and I'm glad that this won't. I'm glad this is Future standing alone, doing his thing, because you have to focus on what he has to say. You're not focusing on what's going to happen because of what he has to say, or if anyone's going to respond to what he has to say. You're not looking for a response to a verse by another artist, or like, you're not surprised when a BBL Drizzy pops up. Like, it's none of that. It's Future standing on his own too. And to me, like, that's perfect. That's what I want from Future. That's what I've always wanted from Future, and he's delivered so much, and this is no different. My top three tracks here, I think it's pretty obvious at this point. In order: one, two, three. Too Fast, Ocean, South of France. Those are my top three. Other ones, had a chance. I think Ski had a chance. I think Plutoski had a chance. I think Teflon Don had a chance. But those three, man, Too Fast immediately, and then Ocean and South of France pretty immediately as well. Those are my top three. I'm curious to see what Nate has to think. Like I said, he's been celebrating his birthday this weekend, so I haven't talked to him too much. I am excited to see what he has to think about it, because usually our taste in certain tracks is different. We might like the album the same, but the tracks that stand out to us are different a lot, and that's always a good part of what we have going on here. But with that, I want to thank you for tuning into episode 519 of the Cat Podcast. Again, if you like this episode, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, follow Old Milk on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also check out oldmilk.co for more information, more content. Again, I'm Taylor McLeod, and we will be back when hip hop tells us to.